Hello, my name is Caitlin Donovan, and my presentation is on the long-term release of mercury from silver mercury fillings. Here I've listed my table of contents, which includes objectives, Figure 1, which is the United States total emissions of mercury, Figure 2, which is the initial releases of mercury into land, air, and soil in New York and New Jersey, Figure 3, which is mercury emissions from deceased persons, Figure 4, mercury release from human waste, Figure 5, mercury exposure in dental professionals, and summary and my references. The purpose of this presentation is to investigate the effects of long-term mercury release from mercury silver fillings, also known as amalgam fillings. I will be referring to these fillings as amalgam for the rest of the presentation. Amalgam fillings are still widely used by dentists, but they are beginning to be phased out and replaced with composite resin, which is another restoration material. Amalgam fillings are made up of 45 to 55% mercury, and the rest of the makeup is silver. Mercury can be released from these fillings directly and absorbed by the body, which can lead to health effects. Mercury can be released into the environment through the direct vapors, but mainly through dental and human waste. The release of mercury into the environment causes air, water, and soil pollution. So throughout this presentation, I'd like to investigate how the long-term release of mercury affects both the health of the dental professionals working closely with it and the environment. Figure 1 shows the total mercury emissions in the United States. This table is from the official and most recent United Nations Environmental Program report. The biggest source of mercury emissions in the United States are from coal burning. However, mercury waste from the dental fields are a large contributor as well. Dental waste are not directly accounted for in this report from the UNEP, but it falls under waste from products, waste incineration, and cremation. Waste from products is the second largest contributor to the total mercury emissions in the United States, and dental waste plays a role in this. The reason that dental waste plays such a large role in mercury emissions is due to the mercury released from amalgam fillings. In Figure 2, we see a pie chart that represents the initial releases of mercury to air, wastewater, and solid waste in New York and New Jersey. It has been estimated that 40% of wastewater entering the New York, New Jersey harbor was from dental facilities. The biggest contributor to mercury to wastewater treatment plants is dental offices as well. The issue with all of this mercury being released into the wastewater treatment plants is that they are designed to treat human waste and not heavy metals. Approximately 2,500 kilograms per year of mercury are added to the wastewater, and 5 to 30% of that ends up in the New York, New Jersey harbor. Dental facilities are the biggest contributors to solid waste as well. 1/3 of this waste is incinerated, and 3.5% ends up being released into the atmosphere. The remainder goes into landfills and monofills, but only a small amount of mercury that ends up in these landfills and monofills is released into the atmosphere. The mercury from dental waste is separated out into sludge or biosolids. This sludge is then incinerated, which releases mercury into the atmosphere. The biosolids are used as fertilizer, which releases mercury into the soil. In Figure 3, we look at a bar graph that represents the mercury emissions from amalgam in deceased persons in the United States. The emissions of mercury from amalgam in deceased persons is an area for concern. During the cremation process, the high temperatures that are used causes the majority of mercury to be released from the amalgam fillings. This means that even more mercury vapor will be released into the air and affect the environment. In this table, you can see that 2 tons of mercury are released into the air as a result of cremation. 0.6 tons of mercury are also released into the soil as a result of cremation. In the United States, the cremation of 320,372 bodies led to about 2,800 pounds of mercury emissions into the atmosphere. Burying the body is an alternative to cremation, but that means that mercury will be released into the soil and groundwater. This table shows that in the United States, 5 tons of mercury were released into the soil and 0.4 tons were released into the groundwater as a result of burials. It is believed that mercury released from fillings due to cremation will continue to increase. This is most likely due to the fact that the majority of dental fillings in the older population are amalgam fillings compared to the younger population where the majority of them have composite restorations. There is also an overall increase in cremations over burials, which will lead to the release of mercury from amalgam in individuals that have these fillings. In Figure 4, we see a graph that shows mercury released from human waste. We see the number of amalgam-filled surfaces versus mercury released in urine and feces. The environment is affected by the release of mercury through feces and urine from individuals with amalgam fillings. Amalgam fillings cause an increase in mercury levels in bodily fluids such as urine and saliva. We are not including saliva in this graph because it is not necessarily a human waste. There is also an increased level of mercury in feces. Individuals with amalgam fillings excrete more than 10 times more mercury in their feces than those with no amalgam fillings. It is estimated that approximately 8 tons of mercury is flushed into sewers, streams, and lakes each year. Methylmercury is also released into the environment through human waste from the consumption of fish. Both sources of mercury, although they are in different forms because the mercury that is in amalgam fillings is in the form of elemental mercury, but they both lead to mercury pollution in the water. The amount of mercury released from human waste is greater than that of dental facilities. This figure depicts the amounts of amalgam surfaces versus the amounts of mercury released in urine and feces. The blue line shows the amounts of mercury released in feces, while the green line shows how much mercury is released in urine. The levels of mercury increase in both feces and urine as the number of surfaces filled with amalgam increases. In Figure 5, we see the mercury levels in dentists versus controls. This table is based on a study that was done comparing the mercury levels in dentists versus controls. The control subjects were a group of individuals who were not exposed to the dental environment in the same way dentists are. Mercury is released during the placement, replacement, and removal of dental amalgams. Dentists are exposed to a large amounts of mercury by working with amalgam restorations. Prolonged exposure to mercury can lead to health effects, especially for the female dentist. Mercury exposure can affect the central nervous system, skin, lungs, liver, kidneys, and gastrointestinal system. The female dentist working with amalgam has an increased risk of pregnancy complications, fertility issues, and menstrual cycle disorders. In the table above, the highest amounts of mercury was found in fingernails. Toenails and fingernails are good indicators of how much mercury is being absorbed in the body. It is important that dentists practice safe handling of amalgam to lower their risk of developing any health issues. Dentists are exposed to amalgam if they have these fillings in their own mouth as well, further increasing their exposure. In this study, measurements of the air were taken around the dental office, including the autoclave, base of the chair, mercury storage area, and above the work surface where amalgam preparation takes place. It was shown that there were levels of mercury in these areas, further increasing the risk of mercury exposure to dental professionals. Many of the dentists in this study reported that they suffered from symptoms due to mercury exposure. These symptoms included kidney disorder, memory disturbance, loss of appetite, tiredness, hand tremor, gastrointestinal disturbance, problem sleeping, nervousness, and poor concentration. Of these symptoms, the kidney disorders and memory disturbances were reported at higher incidences than the controls. The urinary values of the dentist were 4 times the amount of the controls, but still below the health and safety executive guidance value. There was a significant correlation with hours worked and urinary mercury, but there was no correlation in other areas. So overall in this table, we can see how much higher the mercury levels are in the dentist opposed to the control subjects. In summary, the dental field is responsible for good amounts of the mercury pollution in our environment. The biggest contributor of mercury pollution is actually through human waste and not directly from dental waste. Mercury from amalgam restorations is absorbed by the body and excreted as waste, which leads to mercury pollution. The amounts of mercury that is released in urine and feces increases with the number of amalgam filled surfaces. So, the more amalgam an individual has in their mouth, the greater the environmental impact they have. With increasing cremations, we will see an increase in mercury that is released into the air and soil. Dentists are at a high risk for mercury exposure and the health effects that are associated with it. But the good news for dentists and the environment is that amalgam is being phased out and we will no longer be using it. We will be using alternatives such as composite resin, which are better for our health and the environment. That concludes this presentation on the long-term release of mercury from mercury silver fillings. This slide shows the references that made this presentation possible. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.